But at some point during his 14 years of campaigning all over the Republic and beyond, one of Caesar's factors had used some of the enormous sums of money he'd acquired in purchasing land and building a grand villa here. There were plenty in Rome who maintained the notion that Caesar had his eyes set on nothing less than monarchy, and this palatial home could only fuel that fire. A high wall with no windows and just this one gate enclosed a set of grand sculpted gardens that spread up the slope above the Tiber, opposite the city. Such was the gradient that even over the walls Antonius could see the avenues of cypress trees, the jetting fountains, the beautiful statues, and there, above it all, the towering villa of Rome's dictator. He felt a familiar twitch reach his face and tug at the corner of his lip as the guard knocked again, and finally the gate opened. The sight of what emerged set that twitch off all the more, and he thrust out his hand. A faceless lackey placed a cup of wine in it, and Antonius slugged down the rich, unwatered liquid with a sense of relief, for even in an instant he felt its familiar warmth take the edge off his nerves. The slave retrieved the empty cup, and Antonius took a step forward, while his guard announced him to Caesar's soldiers, for that was what they were. There was little really to distinguish the guards on Caesar's estate from the legionaries that had traipsed across the world with him, and with good reason. Most of them were drawn from those very legions, veteran killers who owed the general everything, men loyal beyond all doubt. Their arms and uniforms were very familiar. Of course, they openly brandished weapons of war, for here they were outside the Pomerium, and the laws of Rome did not apply, leaving them free to move about fully armed. As the almost legionaries opened the gates fully and stepped back to allow them entrance, Antonius, feeling a familiar prickling sensation of warning, turned. The street was wide and spacious, this side of the river not packed tight like the bulk of the city, and there were considerably fewer people about. But those who were generally looked his way. A toga-clad man with a large entourage at the gate of the city's most eminent citizen would draw attention naturally. Nothing really seemed out of place, and yet something out there had set off a warning with Antonius. He noted it, and tried to commit that ordinary scene to memory before turning once more and walking through the archway into the grand gardens. Antonius's lip twitch began again. A set of steps led up directly to the gardens between lawns, flower beds, fountains, pools, and avenues, straight from the gate to the villa itself, and Antonius knew why. Anyone approaching Caesar would be exhausted and trembling from the climb by the time they arrived, putting the general immediately at an advantage. The old bastard knew every trick there was. For those in the know and favoured by the general, of course, there was an alternative. A litter had been brought round and lowered to the ground for him. The 8 men bearing it were Hispanics, Antonius thought, from the look of them. Big men. But then they had to be, really. Stepping inside, Antonius settled himself as the vehicle was lifted up onto shoulders and began to move. His entourage followed, bracing themselves for the climb. They need not use those awful steps, though. A second approach wound like a snake up the hill at the side of the estate, the journey twice as long but half as steep. Antonius looked out of the window as he climbed, noting how expertly the men changed their stance and grip to keep the litter horizontal despite the slope. He couldn't decide whether what he was seeing on the journey was meant as honest tribute or as some sort of joke. At every second turn of the winding path, they passed a small shrine with tumbling waters, each dominated by a statue. From the very start they drew the eye, for that first one was truly familiar. Antonius had commanded cavalry at Alesia almost a decade ago, and he knew Vercingetorix as few would. He could see how well the sculptor had rendered the image of the Gallic chief. From there, the statues were no less familiar as they climbed.